This video is presented by mybookie.ag. What's up, everybody? Here are the official predictions of UFC 262. A very good card. It's overlooked. A lot of people are only looking at the top two fights, the championship fight and Tony Ferguson's fight with Beneil Dariush. But when you really dive into the card, there's a lot of very closely contested fights. I think the UFC did a very good job of structuring this card. All these fights make perfect sense, and it's a reason why almost all of them are a pick'em on the betting odds. And I'm not even kidding. Nearly every single fight on this card is even on the odds. And while looking at the card, I will have to say the prospect of the night is going to go to Mike Grundy, one of the best wrestlers in the UFC credentially, who was an Olympic freestyle wrestler. He has good boxing skills, very tough, very durable, great power. His wrestling has transitioned MMA very well. I'm very much looking at how he does on Saturday. The fighter of the night, I'll have to say, is Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson is the main attraction to the card. He's the biggest name on the card, but also he has the most to lose on Saturday. All eyes are going to be on Tony Ferguson, on how he performs against Beneil Dariush. I'm not going to say the main event because there isn't a specific fighter we're really looking at. I know Michael Chandler is a fighter that the UFC really wants to win. He's extremely marketable, but I'll say the fighter of the night is going to go to Tony Ferguson. The banger of the night, the most explosive, fun fight of the card is probably going to go to Shane Burgos versus Edson Barboza. This is an all offense and no defense kind of fight. Just two guys throwing bones at each other from start to finish. Burgos puts on the pressure that Barboza is not going to be able to escape, and there's going to be a lot of collisions happening between two of the biggest guys of the featherweight division. The fight of the night, I think, is going to go to the main event. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. This is technically the best fight of the card. They're the most skilled guys on the card by far, and it's such an even fight. They present so many problems in front of each other. Man, just technically, it's going to be a treat to dissect it. And with all that, we're going to jump right into Shane Burgos versus Edson Barboza. This has the potential to be the fight of the night. Both guys are extremely dangerous in their differing styles, and they're both huge for the weight class. I mean, I don't know how they make 145 pounds. I honestly don't. Both are 5'11", 75-inch reach, ripped beyond belief. But the fact that they can make the weight and they look massive in the cage means that they are not compromised. And they both generate some decent power, especially for Edson Barboza because of the way he throws his punches. He swings to take off your head. He has already dropped both of his featherweight opponents. He dropped Dan Ige with a looping right hook and Makwan Amirkhani twice with a darting right straight. More emphasis on speed rather than force. And that just goes to tell you, even though he's one of the most powerful guys in this division, he's still one of the fastest guys as well, which is very intimidating for anyone going up against him. He's dropped a weight class and still able to compete with the speed of guys who weigh less than him. That's how fast he was in the lightweight division. And then when you look at Shane Burgos and the way he throws punches, he generates a lot of power, but he doesn't wing or load up his punches at all. If he did, he will be able to generate that one punch knockout power, but he throws about 50 to 75% into every single punch. He focuses more on perfect offensive technique with volume rather than using it to deliver power. This is why his jab is one of the best in the entire game. His right straight is so sneaky, it's hard to see coming. He keeps his hands really low, so it's especially hard to see. He has a decent check left hook. He has good uppercuts. He rips to the body very well, and body shots are going to be a big weapon against Edson Barboza, who does kind of gas out in fights. When you look at his fight with Makwan Amirkhani, he was starting to gas out in the third round. Even though the pace of the fight wasn't extraordinary or anything like that, that is some good news for Shane Burgos, who's going to rip to the body with the left hook. And most important of all, he's going to crowd Edson Barboza. He needs to get in Barboza's face from the start of the fight to the finish. He has the better cardio, he has the volume boxing, and Barboza gets very agitated when someone stays in his face. You see him swing punches to get you away from him, and this exposes him. The thing though is, Shane Burgos' defense is not that great. He doesn't pick his hands up, he doesn't move his head that much, he just walks you down and relies on his chin. That is so dangerous, going up against even a retreating Barboza. He's been dropped a few times in his career for his lack of defense, and a few punches from Barboza is going to put down Shane Burgos, if not knock him out. There is a potential for Barboza to be the first fighter to knock out Shane Burgos. And when the fight starts in open space, Barboza has the leg kicks. Burgos stands very heavy on his front leg. He's going to take a lot of damage early in every round until he starts pushing Barboza back to the cage, where Barboza cannot really use his kicks to the same effect. And ultimately, this is why the fight is so hard to call. The more I think about it, the more I think that Barboza should be able to win. But with the amount of times I've seen him backed up in fights and continuously get caught for it by winging his punches and throws his own defense out the window, I can see where Shane Burgos starts breaking him down with his volume and pressure until a third round TKO. So this fight is almost a 50-50, definitely not a fight to bet on, but my official prediction is going to be Shane Burgos wins by a third round TKO. but he needs to stay in Barboza's face and put as much volume on Barboza as possible. He needs to expend his gas tank in this fight. By doing that, he's also going to expend Barboza's in a battle of attrition. Barboza's not going to be able to keep up, and this eventually leads to Barboza breaking in the third round. Shane's defense, though, scares me. And then we go to the co-main event. Tony Ferguson versus Beneil Dariush. There's a lot riding on this fight. This may be do or die for Tony Ferguson, who's taken a big step down in competition compared to the top of the top that he's been fighting on a consistent basis for years. Not a knock on Dariush, but Tony's been fighting the best. Losing to Dariush may spell the end to Tony Ferguson as a contender or a champion in the lightweight division. And for Beneil Dariush, beating someone like Tony Ferguson puts him on a rocket ship to fight the contenders of the division. Tony Ferguson, who may be vulnerable right now, may be the guy to beat in order to get themselves in contendership. And for the first time in Tony Ferguson's entire career, besides his UFC debut, he is an underdog going into a fight. In the last 10 years, this is the only time Tony Ferguson's ever been an underdog. What a change in times, man. But even still, Tony Ferguson has the skills on paper to be able to beat someone like Beneil Dariush. He has overall more effective, more efficient striking. He's technically better in some areas. Dariush is very stiff with his punches. He's developed knockout power and more confidence in his left hand as a southpaw. Tony Ferguson's a switch stancer. Tony Ferguson's a better wrestler. It would shock me a little bit if he gets taken to the ground by Dariush. It'd probably spell that he is over the hill. But being taken down by someone like Dariush, who does not have good takedowns, is beyond being over the hill. And if he does get taken to the ground, Tony Ferguson's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu should be enough to hang with Dariush. What's better than Dariush's striking is his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That might be his path to victory in this fight. Maybe brawl a little bit with Tony, get some left hands in there. If he starts losing those exchanges because of unpredictability, the reach, and the combinations, then he should start going for the single leg, double leg, and maybe even pulling guard at some points. And even though a lot of people are writing off Tony Ferguson, when he fought Charles Oliveira, he wasn't necessarily losing in the striking. Oliveira was not that successful on the feet, given how good of a striker he is. Tony was landing spinning attacks, he was landing jabs, a few impressive strikes on Oliveira, so what can he do to Dariush, who is a much lesser version of a striker than Oliveira is? And Tony Ferguson has to fight his game. He has to be weird, unpredictable, unorthodox. I understand he's training with Freddie Roach, and he said he even went back to his tough coaches, having a more structured training camp after so many years of him just running it himself. Maybe this is going to implement a more fundamental style for him, such as shooting double leg takedowns, fundamentally correcting his jab, and all sort of stuff. That may actually hurt Tony Ferguson more than it will help him. Because what's made Tony so successful isn't his fundamentals, it's not his perfectly executed jab or clean double leg takedowns and stuff like that. It's his unpredictability. His fundamentals have always been kind of a weak point to his game. So being unorthodox is still going to be the most advantageous thing for him, especially against a guy like Dariush, who still doesn't have the fundamentals down to a T. This even goes into the wrestling. I would actually like to see Tony Ferguson implement offensive wrestling somewhat. He's unorthodox, but he's never really shown offensive wrestling. He never shoots in for takedowns. When he used to back in the day at 170 pounds and even before the UFC, he was extremely successful with this. His takedowns are actually pretty nice, man. It's just he's gotten away from that when he trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when he trained in all forms of striking and stuff like that. I would like to see him beat unorthodox on his feet, as well as implement the high caliber wrestling he has developed ever since college, because a lot of people have forgotten Tony Ferguson is an extremely high-level collegiate wrestler. We just rarely ever get to see it. And that's what a lot of these older fighters are doing, like a Glover Teixeira for an example. They have changed their focus of merely striking to becoming a mixed martial artist, using their background of wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to get it to the ground and dominate. This I would like to see from Tony Ferguson a little bit more as well, especially in this fight. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I am going to go with Tony Ferguson. This is all coming down to the speculation that he is not over the hill necessarily, and he's still Tony Ferguson to an extent. He doesn't need to be the best version of himself to beat someone like Beneil Dariush. Again, Dariush can be somewhat defensively irresponsible, especially when he's attacking. His takedowns could be absolutely thwarted by Tony. He's going to be on the back foot for the majority of the fight. Tony just has to watch out from the left hand and just stay at a range using his jab, switching stances, all sort of stuff. Tony's a bigger guy. He's longer. He has comparable power. He has more volume. He has better cardio. He's faster. He has a better chin. The only thing going against Tony Ferguson is the fact that he's taken so much damage. He may not have the same chin. He may not be the same fighter after the two recent losses, and the fundamental training that he's been getting may actually hurt him instead of help him. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Tony, and I'm going to go by a decision win. And then we go to the main event, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler for Khabib's vacated title. This is one of the best fights of the year in my opinion. It's one of the closest championship fights of the year as well, and it's so hard to call. Not for the same reasons that The other fights are hard to call, both fighters being defensively irresponsible, or one fighter might be over the hill. There's a lot of X factors and speculation. This fight is close because Oliveira and Chandler are so close in skills, technically and mentally. They both present dangerous problems for each other. They both have strengths that attack the other's weaknesses, and ultimately, either of these guys can lose at any given moment. I made a breakdown about this fight already, so if you want to see a more in-depth analysis, I recommend checking out that video. But ultimately what this comes down to is, Michael Chandler is more focused on efficiency with a few techniques rather than have a variety or being very versatile like Charles Oliveira is. Oliveira likes to try new things in fights. Up elbow, spinning attacks. You'll see stuff in a fight that you've never seen him throw before. That is not what you get from Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler really practices and emphasizes a few techniques to a mastery level. So they are very opposite in that aspect. They're very opposite in attributes as well. Chandler's very powerful and fast. Oliveira's better with distance work, precision, timing. One guy's very tall, one guy's pretty short. One guy throws 100% into everything he does. One guy throws 70%, 50% in everything he throws. Completely different styles, but the thing that they have very common is the fact that they both like to pressure fights. They both like to get in the opponent's face, deliver damage, back him up into a corner. In Michael Chandler's case, he likes to blow you out with one punch, whereas Charles Oliveira is like a surgeon who breaks you down with each strike until you expose a neck, or you're exposed to the right hand and it drops you and you can't take any more of the damage. It's almost like torture compared to what Michael Chandler does. But who is going to be the one that's going to pressure in this fight? I think Michael Chandler is going to pressure Charles Oliveira because he's much faster to take the center of the octagon. He always is. He sprints to the center, whereas Charles Oliveira, you'll see him at times get backed up in fights. You've never seen Michael Chandler get backed up continuously in a fight. You probably have to go back way early in his career to ever find that happening to him. In the last 4 to 5 years, you have not seen someone put the pressure on Chandler and keep him on the back foot. That is something that potentially Charles Oliveira can do out of everybody that Chandler has fought. Due to the reach, due to the volume, he has a precise jab, an active front kick. He's one of the best front kickers in the game. He'll throw it to the head or to the body. And because of the volume, there's a lot of danger that gets presented in front of Chandler, which can continuously get him backing up the entire fight. Jab comes at him, he backs up. Front kick comes after, he backs up even more. Another jab, now he's to the cage. Now Charles Oliveira is stalking him with the long range strikes. And Chandler is in a very compromised position where now he can't explode the way he wants to. His takedowns become a lot more obvious. He can't leg kick from there. And when a shorter guy is backing up, in Chandler's case, who likes to explode in everything he does, he's not very methodical with the way he does it. He's also creating more distance between him and Oliveira, which is going to favor the longer striker. When you create distance to land your own punches, you need the opponent to fall into them. So when you're fighting someone like Charles Oliveira, who likes to stick behind a jab and manage distance very well with his strikes, he's going to have to do something very wild to get caught by Chandler in this case. But I don't see this happening until later in the fight, where Chandler potentially starts gassing out. He tends to have good cardio, but you see him more than often showing his heart rather than showing good endurance. He's able to battle through the fatigue a lot better than his cardio actually is. And once his movement stops, once his footwork stops being bouncing and flashy and quick, you're going to see him start backing up in the fight, and that's where things are going to get very bad for him. He's going to start winging that right hand from a distance, and Charles Oliveira is going to have the opportunity to counter him at will. Because like I just said, man, Chandler goes 100% in everything he does. So if he's throwing that right hand, he's going to overextend. He's going to get countered by a jab. He's also very susceptible to low kicks because of his wide stance, and jabs just in general catch him all day. Southpaw, orthodox, doesn't matter. The jab is there all day on Chandler. Coincidentally, these are some of Oliveira's best attacks. This also comes into the guillotine choke, in case Michael Chandler ever instinctively wants to shoot in for that takedown. His neck could be exposed, and he could get into a deep guillotine before he knows it. Now, this does sound like I think Charles Oliveira is just going to win this fight. He has so many advantages over someone like Michael Chandler. He does, actually. He has a lot of advantages over Chandler. From attributes to techniques to approach to game plans to a lot of things. But there's one huge issue with Charles Oliveira, besides the fact that he's going to get backed up in the fight, and I just don't know how he's going to get out of that. It's still puzzling how he's going to stop Chandler from pressuring him early in the fight, and what he's going to do under that kind of pressure, under that kind of overwhelming power. The bigger issue here for me is Charles Oliveira does not move his head. That lone issue can cost him the entire fight. The fact that you don't move your head against the most powerful guy in the lightweight division, who's faster than you, who hits harder than you, who covers distance very quickly, that alone can give Michael Chandler the victory. And that alone is the reason why it's so hard to call this fight. Because early, Oliveira's going to get pressured. He might be open to the big right hand or the left hook that comes afterward. I don't know what he's going to do to stop that kind of pressure early unless he catches Chandler coming in with some knee or something, right? I can absolutely see a scenario where Michael Chandler throws a right to the body, which he does in every single fight to back up his opponent. With that, he overextends in that right hand, leaving his head very open to knees and even high kicks. So I can actually see a scenario where Charles Oliveira moves back away from the right hand, counters Chandler with a knee or a high kick, something that Dan Hooker was supposed to do, but never ultimately threw anything out there. It seemed like he was a little bit more intimidated of the power, where it seems like Oliveira's never intimidated of anything anybody can present to him. That's where the level of experience being in the UFC for 10 years comes into play here. So my prediction for this fight, it's very, very hard to call. I'm almost 50-50, probably not a fight to bet on. I will lean Charles Oliveira here, even though I'm not very confident in that. Chandler has the power even late in the fight, and that is always scary. But there's so many dangerous scenarios that can happen in this fight for Chandler, from knees to the jab, to him getting backed up, to him falling into a guillotine, him getting high kick, front kick to the face. I can absolutely see a hopping switch front kick knock out Michael Chandler, maybe even a flying knee, something wild like that. Also with that, Oliveira is much more methodical and patient on delivering his damage. So I'm going to go Charles Oliveira, and I'm going to go by a second round submission. I think he drops Michael Chandler, potentially with a kick or a knee, and then catches him in a rear naked choke or something like that, because Chandler does give up his back whenever he gets hurt. This is not an absolute win for either fighter. They both have a great chance of winning this fight, which is why this fight is even on the betting odds. And because that, the best place to go to is mybookie.ag. Best sportsbook and lines in the game. There's so many pick'em fights, there's so many close, unpredictable fights. Because that, there's so many opportunities to earn big on this card. I mean, you already heard it, Tony Ferguson is an underdog for the first time ever since his UFC debut. And this is only for the fact that there's speculation that he's over the hill. If he's not that over the hill, or the training camp has actually helped him tremendously, he should be able to dominate someone like Beneil Dariush. The main event is pretty much even. Shane Burgos versus Barboza is almost even. Vivian Arajo versus Caitlin Chukagian is pretty much even. Anthony Shevchenko versus Andrea Lee, Jordan Wright versus Jamie Pickett, Andre Munoz versus Jacare Souza, Lando Venata versus Mike Grundy, Tucker Lutz versus Kevin Aguilar. These are like pretty much even fights. There's so many opportunities on this card. It may be a gold mine for anybody who bets on it. And with so many to pick from, you could put up a parlay by lining up fighters that you are confident in winning to multiply your earnings. And by going to mybookie.ag, you can get the deposit bonus. You get a first free deposit halfway all the way up to $1,000, and all you got to do is use the promo code WEASEL to activate this offer. That's promo code WEASLE to take advantage of MyBookie's sign-up offer. Visit mybookie.ag today, where you bet, you win, and when you win, you get paid. And there's not much else to really say about the card in terms of betting odds. I mean, almost every fight is even. It's crazy. I've never seen a card like this. And I do agree with most of them. I mean, these are all very close fights. They did a very good job of structuring this card. From top to bottom, we are probably going to see some amazing fights, man. So I hope you guys enjoyed the prediction video. If you did, make sure to thumbs up, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.